Here are my 7 tips to being a stronger tutor. Tip number 1 is to collect results from day 1 and to keep tracking them. If your students go to school, they will have some kind of data attached to them, like a school report, or it could be an exam result. If you collect that from day 1, from the day that they met you, you can track their journey for the duration of the time that they're with you. And that means that you can tell people client stories. You can show the transformation that your students have experienced while working with you. That's much better than telling them. You can actually show them. That's great for social media content or for any other marketing content like email marketing, because you're telling real stories, which builds trust. My second tip is to keep lessons interactive and pacey. Remember that if students are quite young, they might struggle to stay engaged or to keep their concentration going, or even there's that stamina, isn't there, of learning for a full hour or for however long your lesson is. Now, a great way to keep that going is to make sure that your tasks are no more than, let's say, 5 minutes. Now, it really depends on the age group that you're working with and, of course, the individual student as well. Something I find really helps is having a timer. And I always set a timer for tasks, and I give students less time than I know that they need. That way, they're really on their toes, and I always reassure them that if you need a bit more time, that's fine. I'll give you 1 or 2 extra minutes. Another thing is to make sure you've got this two-way dialogue going on all the time. It's great to assess for learning. You always know what they're absorbing, what they don't quite understand, which makes your session even more useful for them. But also that two-way dialogue nurtures a relationship where you're working as a team. And I really like doing that as a tutor. When I was a teacher, I was at the front of the class. The curriculum was already laid out for us. But as a tutor, we can choose what we do and we can choose what kind of relationship works best for us. And I like them to think that we're working together rather than it's something that I am leading. So keep that conversation going all the time. Make sure your tasks are really fast and pacey. My third thing is to make sure that you have firm boundaries in place and high expectations, not just from your students, but from the parents and guardians that you work with as well. This can really save difficult conversations or awkward situations. For instance, let's say you have given everyone your phone number and parents are contacting you in the evening when you're trying to relax. And when you see that message, you feel like you need to respond. You can't quite relax until you have responded. Well, that can get out of hand very fast, can't it? So you want to make sure that you've got firm boundaries in place. Something I do is I only give my existing clients my phone number, and they know that that's really there for an emergency. If they contact me on my phone, I tend to direct them to my emails so I can keep everything in one place. Also, I don't respond, or I don't tend to respond. Sometimes I have, but I don't tend to respond in the evenings or outside of working hours, so to speak. That encourages them not to keep contacting me outside of those hours. With my students, I also keep those expectations high. I have boundaries in place as well. So an example of an expectation, let's say that you set homework and you give them a week to complete it. They arrive at your next lesson and they haven't done it. And they say it's because they didn't really understand. Now, something that I do is I say to them, okay, that's fine. Next time, I don't want you to just struggle for a week. I want you to get in there nice and early, check if you have any questions for me and ask those questions, and I will help you. I'll help you in between our lessons, but make sure that you've understood the work and then you can complete that homework. And so those high expectations means that your students get a lot out of those lessons, and really it's our job to guide them through the things they need to do. My fourth thing is start your lessons with a conversation rather than saying, right, here's what we're going to do today. Starting with a conversation, especially when you're teaching one-to-one, really nurtures a strong relationship with them. And as tutors, of course, the biggest advantage we have over classroom teaching is that we can focus on the whole child. We don't just have to focus on the academic side. And of course, that makes them more engaged, it makes them better learners, and it just helps them, doesn't it? Which is what we want to do. That's why we do what we do. So my lessons always start with, how was your day at school today? How was your weekend? How's your week been? What have you been up to over the school holidays? That kind of thing. It relaxes them into it. And sometimes if something's on their mind, they'll talk about it with you. And that's really positive because it means that you're giving them that safety and reassurance straight away from the beginning. They can then relax and they can participate in that lesson in a relaxed way. My fifth tip is don't overplan. In fact, I actually don't plan for the majority of my students. The only students who I plan for are my home educated students because I am their source of education. The rest of my students who go to school and I'm just supporting them, I don't plan for because I want my lessons to be nice and tailored. I want it to be exactly what they need at that time. So let's say I might say to a student, I was thinking we could do this today. They might say, well, actually, I've got a test on Friday on this. Could we cover that instead? And we need to be able to pivot and just change what we're doing. So really planning can be a waste of time because you want it to be tailored and you might end up having to do something differently. The way I cater for this to make sure that I'm not struggling if a student wants to do something that I haven't prepared for is I make sure I have a huge bank of resources. I have all my topics covered, I have the different stages of their journey covered, and I make sure that I can dip into those as and when I need. Sometimes I don't use a resource, sometimes I'll just grab my whiteboard and I'll freestyle, depending on what they need. My sixth tip is not to overdo or to overcommit. This one's inspired by one of my clients who's recently been really burnt out. She's exhausted, all because she has got too much marking to do. She said this is worse than when I was a classroom teacher. When I asked her how she got into that position, she said that, well, one parent asked me, would you just really quickly mark this for my daughter? And she said yes. And then one piece of work turned into 5, which turned into 10. And then other parents started asking. And before she knew it, she wasn't just planning for these lessons and delivering these lessons. She was also marking all this extra work that she hadn't set. So she doesn't even have an answer scheme, for example. Now, that really ties in with things like having those firm boundaries in place, because once you say yes once, it's really difficult to then say no. So I think it's really important that parents know what the deal is. This is what is included in my fee. And if you want more, of course, we can discuss that and I will probably charge for it. Now, I'm not saying you have to charge for every little thing, but remember, you are working. And if you keep saying yes and you don't charge for it, you're working for free, which isn't acceptable for anyone. You wouldn't go to work for free. So make sure you're absorbing those costs and make sure that you're really measured in what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. And my seventh tip is to have a really strong onboarding process and exit conversations. When students join me, I give them a welcome pack, they have a registration form, and it means that they know that they're really being seen and heard and supported from day one. I collect lots of information from them. And it's great because parents get to use that registration form as a wish list. Can you help my child with this, that? And they really struggle with that. And I use that to steer how I teach them. I don't use it to guide me completely, because I like to form my own assessment. And of course, over time, things change. But it's important to make clients feel supported from day one until the day they leave you. Because remember, we don't just want customers. We want customers who create other customers. And if they have a great experience with us, they'll come back to us when the younger sibling is ready for lessons, or they'll recommend us to other people. So when someone is leaving, think about how you manage that process. Do you have a nice exit conversation where you're leaving them on a supportive note, where you celebrate the progress that they've made, you maybe give them some tips of things that they can continue with? Making sure that someone is supported from start to finish gives clients a great experience, and importantly, it means that they leave with a great impression of you. So there you have it. If you have any tips to add, I would love to hear them. Let's carry on the conversation in the comments. Please do share them and do ask if you have any questions. In the meantime, I'll see you in my next video.